Another terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week in court for the twice impeached, quadruple indicted, disgraced one-term ex-president. On Friday, a Washington, D.C. federal appeals court rejected Trump's claim of presidential immunity, ruling that he can face lawsuits over his role on January 6th. That decision opens up the floodgates, clearing the way for a large number of lawsuits against the ex-president to finally move forward, at least for now. And then just a few hours later, U.S. District Court Judge Tanya Chutkan delivering the knockout punch, ruling that Trump's prior job doesn't give him a, quote, get-out-of-jail-free pass for his criminal acts on January 6th. Joining me now is Elie Ying-Mistal, justice correspondent at The Nation, host of the Contempt of Court podcast, and the author of Allow Me to Retort, a Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. Elie Ying-Mistal, it's always an honor to have you on the show. You know, when I teased your segment, though, and I am going to start there, even though I always love talking about presidential immunity with one of my favorite legal scholars, I do want to talk to you, though, about this idea that the Section 3 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution could save us from Donald Trump, but we'll never get there because judges don't have, and I was going to use another word, but the courage to be able to do that for us. Tell me why.
Yeah, well, if you think about what we're actually asking judges to do, it's to apply a section of the Constitution that hasn't really been used since the Civil War to kick the presumptive Republican nominee off of the ballot. Is it legal? Yes. Should they do it? Of course. But will they? Who has, as you said, the courage? Who has the internal fortitude to actually stand up there and kick this man off the ballot, understanding all of the vitriol and hate, threats of violence that will come to them if they do that? And then remember, what's the prize, right? What's the prize for kicking Trump off the ballot? It eventually gets appealed to the Supreme Court, where 6 conservative judges, 3 handpicked by Trump himself, overrule the district court judge or the appellate court panel that kicks him off the ballot. And then let's remember, it's not just one judge that has to kick him off the ballot, because our election system is based on states' rights, right? And since we have a federalized election system, to get him off the ballot in any significant way, you got to do it in state after state after state after state. Where are we finding these judicial heroes who are going to apply the Constitution against this teapot dictator running for an endless presidency? It's not that they shouldn't do it. If you understand judges as human beings, fallible, weak, fragile human beings, you understand this ain't ever gonna happen.
So, Elie, while you were speaking, we did show Donald Trump in Iowa last night because he talked about these lawsuits when he was railing against the wind. And he talked about the fact that these 14th Amendment lawsuits are going on. He claims that they've actually made him more popular. I have to ask you kind of more of a, I guess, maybe philosophical question then, Elie, which is this an unintended consequence that we're seeing, these attempts to be able to apply existing constitutional law that could actually keep somebody like this teapot dictator, as you call him, off the 2024 ballot? But is the unintended consequence being such that he is gaining some popularity because people are actually pursuing what is a lawful means to make sure that we don't have a dictatorship in 2024?
I don't think so. I don't think he's becoming more popular because people are trying to apply the law against him. I think he's becoming more popular because he is openly defying the institutions of the law and he's facing no consequences, right? Like it's not that we're trying and failing and that's what's happening. It's that we're refusing to do the job and he's being able to set out there against the system, and that is what's making him look stronger because of his open defiance. And everybody understands. I mean, we're talking about kicking him off the ballot. We can't get judges to tell this man to shut up, right? Everybody understands that if he wasn't Donald J. Trump from Queens, but instead Denarius Trump from Compton, that he would be in jail for threatening prosecutors, for threatening judges, for threatening clerks. He would be in jail if he was any other man or if he had a skin tone like me. And we all understand that. So his ability to say these things, do these things, and not end up in the pokey is actually what's, I think, making him look stronger than he is. So it's not the problem is not trying to pursue him to the fullest extent of the law. The problem is not pursuing him to the fullest extent of the law, right? The problem is not making him face the consequences that any other person in this country would be facing for their actions.
And so it's not just Trump, it's Trump judges as well. I want to pivot now to what I think is still a continuing important issue, Ellie, and that is the Voting Rights Act and what happened in the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, gutting the idea that a private plaintiff like the NAACP or an individual would have standing, the ability to go to court, to file the lawsuit and to sustain their presence in court, to seek relief. That was a Trump-appointed judge that made that initial ruling, and that was sustained by the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. Do we see then the parallel track, Ellie, of Trump-appointed judges, Aileen Cannon being one of them, doing things because they think they're empowered to do so because the teapot dictator basically put them in the place to do so?
Look, Trump judges are going to ruin the country whether Trump gets reelected or not. And let's remember with this particular voting rights ruling, which takes away the right to sue. So think about your constitutional rights. Your constitutional rights don't really mean anything if you cannot sue the government to protect those rights. And you know who understands that? The NRA. Because you can't make a common sense gun law anywhere in this country without having private lawsuits from the NRA fall down like a hail of bullets upon your legislation, right? But this Trump judge, he's not taking away the NRA's right to sue. He's taking away the NAACP's right to sue, right? So that's what, but where did that Trump judge get that idea from? He didn't come up with himself. Trump judges are not that smart. He got the idea from Neil Gorsuch, who in a concurrence to an opinion a couple of years ago basically said, I hope somebody makes a ruling like this so I can support them. Like, this is coming direct. This judge was instructed to rule this way by a Supreme Court justice writing a concurring opinion, right? So he doesn't come up with it himself. But this is the point of, this is why Republicans have worked so hard to take over the courts. And on this particular point, it's not just Trump. The thing, and I've talked about this before, but the thing that links a Reagan judge to a Bush judge to a Bush W judge to a Trump judge, the thing that they all share in common is a hatred for voting rights. That's how they are picked. That's what they are vetted for. The questions that they ask Republican judges are basically, do you hate women and do you hate voting rights? And if you hate both of them, you get to have a judgeship, and you get to have a judgeship, and you get to have a judgeship. So that's why this is all coming together right now. They've already taken every shot they can against women and reproductive rights. They've obviously already taken every shot they can against the LGBTQ community. And this is the third leg of the stool, voting rights, because we understand that reproductive rights and LGBTQ rights are popular. So if you're going to take those rights away, you also have to take away voting rights so that people cannot oppose your judicial fiats at the ballots, and that is what these Trump judges are doing.